Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is Yukitsu Times, welcome to my channel, welcome to Total War Warhammer. So I'm taking part in another of those tournaments, and this time I'm not running it, it's the same people, basically. Some new faces, some old faces as well. But again, it's a newbie tournament, which kind of makes it bad for me to be in it, I guess. But yeah, we'll see some interesting games, I think, out of this. So our first matches are against Asmodai 00. Now, there is a different tournament organizer, so the rules are different. That's why I've got 5 of the Cryptors here. You'll see that I've got sort of this rush, standard, very, very standard type of Vampire Counts composition here. We're up against Dwarves. And there's a really big experience gap here, which makes it very, very difficult for my opponent to win this. And, you know, I don't mind saying that or spoiling that, because what we're going to do is delve into this in sort of educational way. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about is actually composition, and this is something that I've been noticing in a lot of these tournament matches. Composition for every faction should follow some basic rules for less advanced players. Just to make it easier for yourself to win. So my composition for the record here is 6 zombies. The reason that I'm using them is to tie up units, of course. 5 units of the Graveguard, 5 of the Cryptors, and then the General, which is Manfred von Karstein. Manfred von Karstein has got the spells Fate of Bajuna, the Invocation of Nihek, and the Wind of Death. And then he's got all of these abilities, including the Swarm of Flies upgrade. So -8 melee attack on anyone around him. So my opponent over here has got miners with blasting charges, or actually these are just regular miners. He's got the 4 units of Longbeards as a center. He's got 3 of the Quarrelers back here as range support. He's got the Lord. He's got a Runesmith without any upgrades other than the defaults. He's got the Master Engineer with the standard and all his default abilities. And then he's got a unit of Slayers, he's got a Brimstone Gyrocopter, and he's got 2 cannons. So the problem that I have with this is that, like, it's okay to take the large number of heroes, especially with Dwarves, who I find sometimes need that. What I find difficult with this particular composition is that he's got so much ranged units here. He has 6 ranged units, and he's got ultimately 6 melee units. I think that there's some sort of thing in people's heads in this rating or this level of player that you can go 1-for-1 on ranged and melee units. That's simply not really true. You need to have more melee units than you have ranged units. The gyrocopters does count for that purpose, in my opinion. Although you know that's a fringe case, maybe it doesn't. The cannons definitely do count for that in this purpose. So generally, my heuristic for this would be that for every ranged unit I want to have 2 melee units and 1 anti-cavalry unit. That would just be the general gist of it. What you'll typically see me take in a lot of situations might be 2 Quarrelers, a lineup of like 6 Longbeards, a cannon, and then 4 of the regular Dwarf Warriors in the back there. And that would be a very, very solid line. It would let me adequately protect my Quarrelers or my Thunderers and my cannon without having to divert too many resources. It would give me a good solid front line that would prevent him from just pushing directly through these guys. Like that would be something that you might see me take. We might even push ourselves up to 3 Quarrelers or other such things, and skimp a little bit, like just by going 6 of the Longbeards up front, which is a little bit short, but it'll be able to do the job a little bit, and then 4 units of Warriors is enough for that. So my opponent simply has a composition that doesn't really work out all that well against regular players. And this isn't just this opponent. This is something that I've noticed in some other replays and other matches in this tournament, and in the previous one as well. So this is just going to be down to experience, though, what happens in this particular match. So Manfred von Karstein, like, you know what Wind of Death does to static lines, and my opponent is bunched up very, very thickly in a good formation for me to get at him. Now, it is a good idea for him to go after my general, but like the Brimstone guns are not going to be able to stop him from getting into position, which is all I really care about, which is why I'm running forward here. Cannons can do some good damage to him, but they're sort of missing here because the gyrocopters are a little bit in the way. They will get a couple good hits, and that is good damage against a target that he needs to kill and is going to otherwise have real difficulty killing. But Manfred does have a little bit of resistance against those ranged attacks, so he's taking about 200 per cannonball, which is not huge amounts of damage. Quarrelers coming out and they're just firing at zombies, and this is why I took the zombies in the first place. Now, this is something that, you know, only people who've experienced this before are really going to understand. If you see a Vampire Count's general heading towards your flank, you have to know what that means. And if you've never experienced it before, it's going to wreck you. Like the first time it happened to me, absolutely, absolutely devastating. So I think we all know sort of what's going to happen here, but let's go ahead and slow motion this because it's quite interesting to watch this in slow motion actually. So this gives you a good solid amount of time to actually move your units once you see this circle, because this circle has been here for quite some time now. And my opponent could have easily sort of moved his units. Now, you will almost guaranteed cause some damage with this spell. I like that little effect of those people there, sort of. But my opponent could very well have moved away from the spell here and taken a lot less damage. He would have still taken some damage, but he would not have taken this much damage. Because, like, just look at what it has done to his front line. He's lost 3 units at the start of the game from one spell, and this should never happen to you. And this is just a case of my opponent not knowing what Wind of Death was, and not he's never seen it being used effectively, is basically it. So, you know, you can think of this as sort of like a baptism of fire sort of thing. So now he knows, basically. This is one of those things that, you know, caught me off by surprise in matches before as well. I still think it's actually an effective spell, and I do still use it against dwarves in particular, because if you sort of fire it at an angle when you see him moving, if you don't see him moving, of course, then it doesn't matter, but if you see him moving, you can fire it at sort of an angle here, and probably it'll sweep through these guys. As he's either moving back, it'll start hitting more of his longbeards. If he starts moving forward, it'll hit the quarrelers. So there's no great way if you fire it at an angle, but in this case I could fire it straight forward here. At this point in time, like, his Slayers are sort of trying to mask my General, but they don't do anything against air targets, so I don't have to worry about this. And at this point in time, we've crashed into what remains of those Longbeards. We're making sure it's just zombies and Graveguard fighting this unit of Slayers, because that's all I want to be fighting those guys. But over here, like, Cryptorers, Graveguard, shattering straight through the front lines of the Dwarves, and we've got tons of units just pouring around the sides here. There's nothing you can do to stop him from getting into his crossbows and his cannons and so on and so forth. So my opponent is going to call this one quits pretty quickly, because he knows that there's no way that he can win this at this point in time. It's simply not in the cards for him. So, yeah, a couple of lessons that we can learn from this. Another thing, never take veterancy on the ranged units. It's just throw the rest of the veterancy onto your melee units. So yeah, like, 147 of the kills on this one were from Manfred von Karstein himself. Like, almost all the work was done by him personally. And, you know, this just comes down to experience. If you ever see that sort of positioning, now you know that sort of thing. But as well, you know, the composition in general, even if he had moved back to and negated, like, say, 90% of the damage from the Wind of Death, the Wind of Death still would have been pretty good there. Just because of the types of units they had and the sort of formation they had, it still would have got some kills no matter what. Like, it's almost impossible to completely whiff it, but it's very hard to get that kind of an effect out of it. 147 kill Wind of Death is pretty rare. But if he had a better composition, I would have had a much harder time sort of getting into that kind of fight and winning that sort of match there. Let's go ahead and continue and look up our second match here. So in this one, he's using a similar setup with his dwarves again. I'm using Chaos this time. As you can see, I've got the 3 Chaos Marauders with some veterancy, 5 Chaos Warriors with great weapons, 2 of the Chaos Warhounds with poison, 2 of the Armored Trolls. We've got a Lower Fire Wizard, and we've got a Chaos General on a great on a Dragon. He's got the sort of Lord, Rune Priest, Runesmith, and Engineer. He's got 2 of the Miners with blasting charges, and I actually like this combination, but he took too much other stuff at range in addition to this. But the Master Engineer mixed with Miners with blasting charges actually augments the Miners with blasting charges. He's only got a very, very thin melee front line here, though, and again, it's going to be a case of me being able to overwhelm him. So he's got 2 of these Miners with blasting charges over here. He's got 3 of the Longbeards up front. He's got 2 cannons, Master Engineer, 3 of the Quarrelers, the Slayers over here, and then he's got the Gyrocopter with Brimstone Gun. I saw in the first game that he liked Slayers, so I didn't really take that many monsters. Like, the 2 Trolls are going to have no problem sort of avoiding the Slayers before I block him down. I was going to use my Marauders as a flanking force, actually, in this, but instead I find them on my opponent's center and everything else they have on their flank. So I've switched it. These guys are now sort of my center. They're going to try and spread out and attack both these minor units as well as these frontline units here to a certain degree. Then we're going to get Chaos Warriors into the fight. Now he's focusing all his fire onto the Chaos Marauders. This is just something that happens, like I do it as well. But since there's no definitively different icon for the Marauders compared to the Chaos Warriors, sometimes, you know, you just see axes and you figure, okay, well, they're all the same. And then you end up firing at the Chaos Marauders, and it's a huge waste of your cannon fire. He really needs to be firing at the Chaos Warriors, obviously. dragon again in the brimstone gyrocopters, and again, they're just not really going to be able to stop a dragon. Anytime you're playing as the dwarves and you're against somebody who has anything in the air, these things are basically nullified, even if you micro them and work with them a lot. So one thing about Chaos Warriors, they are very, very slow, so it will take them a long time to get into position. It does not take as long for the Chaos Warhounds with poison to get into position. And we can see actually that we're sending some guys already to charge into the Quarrelers. And this is a nice timing to get into the Quarrelers. They're in range of my units, and this is going to stop them for a large part firing at my units here. So these guys all being in melee combat is going to really harm their ability to fire at me. And this unit's going to get tossed around by the fire vortex here, and we've actually got it traveling through a couple and got a pretty good scatter on that. I probably didn't need to overcast it like I did. I probably shouldn't have, but it did deal quite a lot of damage. Just sort of scatters off into the distance, though, for the last half of it. So over here, Chaos Lord with the dragon has cleaned up one of the cannons. We'll be moving our hounds into the other cannon while our general flies back into the miners with the blasting charges, who are tied up for the most part by these marauders here. And marauders with great weapons can one-for-one trade really well with the miners with blasting charges. But he's been disrupted for long enough by the shenanigans going on back here with the Fire Vortex, the General, my Poisonous Warhounds, that he hasn't managed to get much shooting off. So we've slammed in with Chaos Warriors with great weapons in a couple of places who are virtually untouched. We've redirected our trolls so that they can head around the center area. These Chaos Warriors with great weapons are going to move to tie down these Slayers and to get around to the Quarrelers. And we're also sending in these Chaos Warhounds. So this is why I was talking about that sort of ratio idea. I've engaged all of his melee line except for one single unit, and he hasn't really got any ability to block these two Chaos Warriors with great weapons. He has no real way to block these Chaos Warriors, although the Chaos Warriors and Trolls here are just going to pile into the front. He's got nothing that can really block those. There's sort of 4 units, 5 units, I guess, that kind of, 4 units that can kind of get around to his ranged units unhindered without him being able to answer that in any sort of real way, shape, or form. And if he had the proper ratios, he definitely could have, and that's sort of the problem that he's running into with his particular composition. You simply cannot make an army with this little melee troops. The other sort of compositional error, this is a little bit of a harder one to predict. When you're against Chaos, expect heavy armor, because that's what they're going to take against Dwarves to the large extent. So these Longbeards with normal weapons do nothing. These guys cannot beat Chaos Warriors with great weapons. My 2 units of Chaos Warriors with great weapons can easily cleave through 3 units of Longbeards, were it not for the fact that they're being supported by heroes. But yeah, at this point in time, there's really not a whole lot of hope for him. These Quarrelers all getting wrapped up. You could also think of it in the sense that these Quarrelers should be Thunderers, because Chaos does have that sort of tendency towards heavy armor. So Thunderers would be better there. The cannons could actually have been really good there, but he fired them at sort of the wrong targets. So to some extent, this was actually a more decisive victory for me than the Undead one was. If the Undead one had continued, he probably would have gotten some more kills, blah, blah, blah. But in this one, this pretty much was as much as he could have killed with this army. And that sort of is the way it is. So there's, a lot of things that my opponent could have learned, can learn from this set of games and can take with him in future matches. It's just that, it's a tough game when you're not necessarily that experienced in the multiplayer and don't know it that well. But I hope, these will help you if you're a newer player and you're up against someone maybe a little bit more experienced, to sort of think about, maybe what sort of things are good to take, what sort of things are safe to take. Because, it is actually really hard to defend this much ranged units and this many artillery with this few melee units. And I've seen it done. I've had people use it against me and have won some matches against me like that, although it's pretty damn rare for people to win against me with the compositions that are this missile heavy with this little melee infantry. But if you're sort of thinking in the correct way and you can do the right things, you don't have to worry about sort of microing to protect these cannons and protect these Quarrelers, because they'll be properly protected by your composition, and that just wasn't what my opponent was doing there. So anyway, I hope you found these videos enjoyable. I'm only posting my personal matches for these ones, but in any event, I hope to see you all for the next round.